David's been very kind to me, but at the end of the day, if you're looking at what I'm going to be talking about a little bit is federal government policy and strategy with respect to connectivity. There isn't anybody really elsewhere in the country that shaped that probably more than David Johnson in terms of giving it a vision, giving it a strategy, his tremendous chairmanship and ability to bring out the best in people. Even though when you get a lot of people around the table, especially industry people with a very, very strong corporate interest in something that's worth effectively millions or even multiple billions of dollars, it takes a real master to be able to bring out the strengths and the collaborative part of individuals, get them set their narrower corporate interests aside. And David's one of the few people that I've met, and that's certainly the case with other people in Ottawa, the minister, etc. And hence why he's being poached by us at every possible occasion to lead trouble, lead us out of trouble in hockey, or to lead us ahead in the area of online learning and other things like that. So, David, it's a great work. Okay, anything I don't think Mr. Jekyll or Dr. Hyde or the word more disciple of David Johnson. It's probably a more apt description of me. Now, a couple of things I won't get into here, but if we were getting into a history lesson, I would talk about, and that is that David led an extremely important policy-making exercise called the Information Highway Applications Advisory Committee to the Minister. And Mike Nitter, in fact, and Kevin were instrumental in putting that in place. But really it came down to David and John Manley chairing this committee and basically forming a consensus that, in fact, getting connected was important for Canada's future prosperity, and how we had to basically work together across industry and government and education and communities and provinces, etc., to basically do something that very few other countries, in fact, if any in the world, have actually done, which is to form a national strategy that could be implemented in a very pluralistic way. And although there are countries that are slightly farther ahead than we are, and certainly there are a lot of places for us to learn about what's going on, there aren't very many countries that have got a synergistic strategy which is being implemented everywhere. This isn't something led by Ottawa. This is something where the federal government is a partner, but it ain't the only partner for sure. It's not even the most essential partner in a lot of cases. And that's very unusual. And I look around to see what a lot of countries are doing, and either there's not much happening, or there's a lot happening, but it tends to be driven by a few big organizations. The problem with that, from my limited experience, is big organizations have their mandates change on what's wrong. And what's popular today is unpopular next time, even though it worked, but a new group of people come in and they can't do what the old guys did. So that's a very dangerous strategy for something as big as the information highway. Now, I'll get into my presentation. We can have some time hopefully for things. I tend to go a little fast here, and you'll see why, because I don't know enough about what I'm talking about. So I'm skipping over. I'm just doing the wave hops. And if there are any economists in the room, you don't ask questions. I'm giving you a presentation that Kevin Lynch gives, and David's seen Kevin give presentations. He's an absolutely stellar economist and a real shaper of the government's overall industrial and economic development agenda. But I'm trying to give a sense of why we came to see the information highway as important, and then sort of a glimpse as to where we're going. And it tends to be reasonably good vision in the short term, but as it sort of gets over towards the horizon, it's a bit fuzzy. But we all have the same fuzzy view of the future anyway. So let me proceed here. So work. Well, down. There we go. Now this was in the latest edition, and it's very important. I think this is probably one of the most succinct statements as to why the information highway is crucial to Canada and where we think we're going with it. It's a country that innovates, that's got the skills, that has got the competitiveness to survive, that's really going to be a winner in this global digital economy. And there's no two ways about it. You may not like the WTO, or you may love it. But this globalization and corporatism is changing the face of the world. And it ain't going to be the same in 20 years' time. We're going to be on one side of the line, or we're going to be on the other side of the line. And we'll probably do a lot more for the world if we're on the sort of winning side of the line, where we can sort of begin to change the way things get shaped eventually. And that doesn't just happen to be between countries. That happens to be between regions and communities and counties and individuals. Right? This issue is extremely divisive. Okay, a lot of people talk about the information highway as being a great big love-in, and everybody gets together, but it ain't that. This is a double-edged sword, and the backside of the sword is much sharper than the front side of the sword. Okay, so it has an ability to divide the world, and really the question is how to implement this tool, this extremely powerful tool, to promote, the positive side, the collaborative, cooperative piece, and yet still, win in terms of competitiveness. Everybody wants to be at least where we are 20 years from now, if not better. So how do we get from there, from where we are now to there, and leave the world a better place from the top down or from the bottom up, whichever way you prefer to look at it. There are 5 sort of major trends, probably more, but at least this is a good, my slide only did 5 trends, so you get top line as far as I'm concerned. One is globalization, and it's become pervasive. How are we going to cope with it? The shift to knowledge workers and the knowledge part of the economy, and how are we going to survive that transformation with our education system? Information highway and how it's reshaping business. It can't be ignored anymore. This is so powerful a technology, there isn't an organization at any dimension in the country that isn't going to be coping with it or dead because of it. Innovation is a source of high value added, and Canada's not a great innovator. We're going to do something about that. And standards of living are driven by productivity, the direct correlation between wages and productivity. Now, the one thing about information technology, information highway, is it plays to all those things. There are even things that come along in the course of the government or in the life of a country, at least for a century, that actually play to a whole bunch of things all at the same time. There have been a few more of those in the 20th century than in other centuries, but this is a very, very powerful one, which will shape Canada as we know it well into the next century. And it plays to every one of those 5 themes. Why are the themes important? Canada is one of the most open economies in the world. If you look at the bar on the left-hand side, that's the flow back and forth of trade. We're singled out as one of the countries that is most open to trade. We're competing every day of our lives for the almighty buck in the world market. And that puts us in a very interesting situation. We're more impacted in the short term by changes in the marketplace. We have to basically look to things about productivity and competitiveness and innovation much more closely than other people, because our short-term, the effects can be very powerful in the short term for us. We're not covered. And we're not doing too well. The slide on the right-hand side shows that if foreign direct investment is a major signal of how we're performing in the world, we've got a lot to gain. We're losing our market share in the important area of where people want to invest. Now, there are many different things that affect investment besides your competitiveness on a day-to-day basis. But over the long term, that's the faith that the world has in us in terms of how productive and effective and competitive they think we are. Canada's got a pretty good record, at least we think we have, in the area of generating jobs. But if you take a look at where all the jobs are in the high knowledge area of the economy. In fact, we're losing jobs quite significantly in the low knowledge area of the economy. And this is very profound. If those blocks had been a little bit of red on the right-hand side, a little bit of yellow on the left-hand side, everybody would have said, well, that's what we should expect. But this is pretty stark. Okay, and it's undeniable. That's facing the education system in Canada as a cold, hard fact of life. Anybody leaving the education system now and not going on to post-secondary education is not going to be part of the knowledge workforce. They're going to be on the other side of that line. They're losers. Okay? Don't like to call them losers, but at the end of the day, they are positioned to lose economically. And that probably means that they're positioned to lose socially, and that families are positioned to lose socially in the long term. That's the same chart basically by industrial sector, and there's only a few places where, in fact, there's any growth at all in the high school diploma area of the economy, unless we're no diploma course. This chart is out of date. It was probably only done a couple of weeks ago, but because the internet doesn't transmit things at only 355 times faster, it's probably over 1,000 times faster. Okay? And that is very powerful. At the end of the day, in a knowledge-based society, knowledge-based economy, when bits and bytes are the nature of work, the speed of transmission is the key, okay? Or certainly one of the keys. And the cost of acquiring that ability to transmit is a major factor. So what we've got is a pervasive technology, the cost of which are dropping through the floor. Bandwidth is becoming infinite and at no cost. And so you and universities, for example, are really faced today with the proposition that you're You're not in the same marketplace you were in just a few years ago. You're in a global marketplace. People are going to be delivering online courseware, like it or love it, like it or leave it, I guess I might say. But the key thing is they're going to be here delivering online courseware to some fractional part of your marketplace, and that part is going to grow. And there's not a lot you can do about it, but unless you want to export your intellectual property and your courseware to other places and take advantage of their open marketplace. So that's we're in a global rationalization exercise, and everybody's got to figure out a coping strategy for this. I'll get back in a minute. Most of you know about CANet 3. So that's now being opened up to online education right across K-12, post-secondary, colleges, universities, etc. It allows us to think about transmitting content at zero cost anywhere in the globe, more or less, at high bandwidth anywhere in Canada. Direct relationship between wages and productivity. I don't really fully understand this, but it's sort of neat because everything clusters around the little red line, and my deputy tells me that that's powerful. Okay, if you can increase your productivity, you're going to reap the rewards in higher wages. Simple as that. For me, a political scientist will self-evident, but this isn't quite so self-evident. Now, if I can remember this, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but at 3.3%. in terms of GDP growth per capita, incomes double in something like 15 years. At 0.07, it takes over 100 years to recover. That's pretty stark. And that's where we are. We're flattening out in terms of overall productivity increase, RGM increase. Now, here's the difference between what a Canadian and what an American earn. And so right now, there is a $17,000 per person gap in income levels. Significant. And that, for most people, that will figure into things they can really measure, like whether they get another television set or a car, etc. I guess I'm not wired for sound here, but it's not a long run. That's important. If you looked at the picture today and talked about how many years Canadians drive cars versus Americans drive cars. That's a fact. We drive cars on average 9. Canada's percentage expenditure on R&D. Now, there's many different measures for how we innovate in Canada. This is one. We're traditionally lower in our investments in R&D. To some extent, that's a reflection of our branch plant technology. A lot of R&D is actually spent by government rather than by companies in Canada, whereas that isn't quite the case in the United States. But there are other measures where we're much slower to innovate, we're much slower to diffuse technology, we're much slower to commercialize technology. On a whole raft of measures about how we innovate and how we exploit innovation, Canada is relatively poor compared to other high performers, not all of which are, the superpower economies in the world. We're not all that competitive in some more middle-ranked European countries either. Another measure is domestic applications in the patent area. And although it looks like we're a little bit higher, most of those patents are actually filed in the U.S. as well as in Canada. They're more or less, they may very well be American technology developed in Canada that's being patented and protected in the U.S. and exploited in the U.S. So what are we looking for in terms of what we need to do to reverse some of these trends? We're going into a new knowledge-based economy. The currency is skills. The method of transport of that is going to be information technology. We need to be able to become a very high-skilled economy. Now, everybody's talking about the brain drain, and the latest report from the ACST basically advises that, in fact, it's not a crisis. There are skill shortages, certainly, and there are places as well where we have skills looking for jobs. We've got unexploited skills. But the prospect in the future is for a looming brain drain. Okay? And the reason why, because there's more investment available globally to be placed in information and to be placed in knowledge-based investments than we can basically staff in terms of plants. We could attract more investment if we had more people to service those investments. And the biggest example of that really right now is Nortel, and the almost crisis that would cause if Canada became not a place where Nortel wanted to make a significant portion of its additional investments. And Nortel has basically told the federal government that, okay, if you don't grow enough people, we're already hiring, I forgot the exact percentage, but it's, I think it's over 20% of the, or maybe it's even higher than that, of the graduates in science and technology from Canadian universities. And that's not healthy for Nortel, because we're working too hard to find the next guy. And it's not healthy for all the other suppliers in the system, because they are having to compete with us. And we pay higher wages than they do. So the depth of the knowledge-based investment and industry in Canada is working too hard, is facing too much of a barrier in terms of the next coterie of skills. So we have basically got to develop more skills more deeply in the economy. That doesn't mean the next PhD. That means a whole labor force that has more knowledge-based skills packed into it. If we can get that knowledge-based skills, it'll find it, that skills base, it'll find its way into the economy in various different ways. More productive workers, more innovative engineers, more innovation in the economy, more productivity, etc. And that will give us, the economists are right, the kind of narrowing of the gap of productivity levels and more the higher income levels we want on a family basis. Where does connectedness fit in? What we have reasoned, and we can have somewhat of a debate about this, is connectedness feeds effectively productivity and society at the same time. So it feeds the economic and the social dimension at the same time. More connected communities are not necessarily communities just doing business back and forth. They're sharing aspirations back and forth. They're solving social problems back and forth. They're working on common cultural projects back and forth. They're more united. Okay? And that in itself, not just across the country, but across the community, can result in less stress, more collaboration, more support systems, and at the end of the day, probably a stronger society. Same thing in the area of the economy. More collaboration between firms, more speedy transmission of innovation back and forth between a supplier and a customer, or between a university and a corporation, etc. More transfer of knowledge between government and industry. Those kinds of things promote productivity. So we're getting the middle out of the system, getting the bother out of the system. We have to be able to package it, send it out one way or another, whether it's e-commerce or technology innovation. But they both lead to stronger society and stronger economy, and it's grounded on the probably undeniable fact that technology and information technology in particular is getting cheaper and cheaper as we move forward over the next 20 years. If we're going to do that, we're going to bank on information technology and to have it become as pervasive as we'd like it to become in Canadian society, Canadian economy, then we are going to need a very substantial amount of public and private investment over the years ahead. And one of the big challenges for government on doing anything in this kind of field is the ability to sustain what it's doing. Okay? And it isn't the fact that it's got a tax problem or whatever it happens to be, or it's paying off a deficit. It's the public will to go into the long term on something. Okay? And many, if you've been in Ottawa or ever lived in Ottawa, Ottawa is just a wasteland of things tried and stopped because something went wrong, and even though it was good, it got closed down, or in some cases it was not very good, and it continued on for a while, and then it got closed down by the Auditor General. The key thing, though, is it's very difficult to sustain a large public investment over a long period of time unless you've got broad-based public support for it. Okay, political will comes from broad-based public support. So if we're going to get into something where we're going to keep pace with the leading countries in the world in terms of the rollout of information technology and making that pervasive in Canadian society and Canadian economy, then we had better have a very broad base of public support. If the information highway is just left to, the rewards of the information highway are left to just a few people, the political will not be there. It'll be something that a few bureaucrats can push, and it'll get a flash in the pan and be gone. Okay? If it's up against the child care agenda, and one is benefiting the rich and the other is benefiting everybody else, guess which is going to win? Okay. Now there has to be, I think, probably room for them both, but unless you've got your information highway pervasive, inclusive, cast in those ways from a policy point of view, you're dead. So this is the strategy that the government has put forward in terms of connecting Canadians. And it really is an attempt to construct a long-term national public investment strategy on the information highway, which will produce the kinds of investments and resources that are needed and the payoffs that can be captured by families, by communities, by individuals across the country, not just at the upper income tier. First part is to get Canadians online. So how do we move to provide universal public access to Canadians throughout the country, including some of the most remote and rural places that the country has to offer? And we've got a number of programs there. And a lot of that is working with very small communities. At the other end of the spectrum, we want to basically create a number of, or identify a number of communities that are real world leaders. Not so much in terms of the investment that they've made in information technology, but the way that they're exploiting information technology, the smart users. Okay, the power of the information highway is not to see who can spend more money putting the wires in the ground, is to see who can extract the most economic and social benefit out of it. And it's quite surprising where you find innovation. Take some of the poor places in the country, and they know how to make maximum use of the limited investment that they're able to make. So what we're looking for are the places that can change their prospects greatest with the minimum amount of information technology, okay? Smart communities. And why we need to do that is because in the international marketplace, we want to try and brand Canada to become a world leader in information technology and change the perception that we're just a good place to come on a holiday, okay? Or extract some resource from the ground. If we're going to do that, we've got to brand the country as a leader. We've done it in a few areas. Automotive is an example. We need to do it in information technology and the other support technologies in behind computer technology. The way to do that is to lead with your communities. We don't have the number of companies that the U.S. has out in the world branding the U.S. We have to have a combination of companies and communities, showing how we can collaborate and basically lead the world in the smart use of the technology. Canadian content online, as the information nexus melts, our exposure on it goes down and down and down, as you'd expect. We're only small players in the world. But we want to have a significant portion of our culture online. We don't want kids in the school system extracting only foreign-based product in the classrooms, otherwise they're going to turn into somebody else's citizens. So, the same sort of thing can apply to the healthcare system and any other system that you're looking for. You need to have your cultural exposure online so that your values are reinforced and shared with the world. Electronic commerce, very, very substantial marketplaces emerging, as you all know, in that field. Canada's firms are slow to take up the challenge and the opportunity here. In the U.S., close to 56% of retailers now are conducting business online, not just having a website, but actually doing some transactions. In Canada, it's 22%. And there's a reason for that to some extent. We're a country made up of small businesses, and small businesses have lots to do with a little bit of money that they've got. And this is an unproven marketplace, and why would I invest in that when I can put a sign out for the shop and probably attract 5 more people in, okay? Why invest in a website? So people have got to be exposed to why this is important, made simple, and then have traffic find them right away. They can't afford to wait. If we're going to invest in this, it better pay off this month. Otherwise, I may not be able to throw my website out, but I'll tell the guy down the street who I not to bother doing because it didn't work for me. Governments online. We need to move the public sector online. We're in a mixed economy. 50% of what Canadians do is somehow or other associated with their community or their governments. And this is an extremely important tool. And because if we get it right, we can actually give people things that they're looking for. And everybody doesn't like dealing with government. So if we can make the experience slightly more enjoyable, slightly quicker, and a little less costly at the tax base, it'll generally be applauded as a good thing to have done. So what we're aiming to do now is to try and basically move Canada to the very forefront of the world's governments online. We've set the goal of being the most reliant, the government that's most effectively using the information highway by the year 2004. And a lot of work will be going into this over the course of the next few years. And then finally, connecting Canada to the world. What role can we play internationally in the information technology area? Canada actually does play a big role because of our involvement in the information telecommunications union, for example, and other things where we've had a historically strong role in information technology. But there's more to that. I mean, we're basically developing what is supposed to be a unique strategy for connecting a sort of a middle-ranked country, sort of slightly richer than the rest of the pack, but we're not all that well-heeled, and we're looking for different ways of doing this stuff at low cost. Guess what? Most of the rest of the world is looking for exactly that solution. They also don't have a lot of money to throw at things. They're looking for innovative approaches, which are low cost, probably not quite as technology rich, but more user driven, okay, as a means of solving their problems. And it's surprising how many people from various other countries are sort of parading through Canada one way or another, looking for what is going on, because we've managed in a short period of time to get a reasonably high profile in terms of what's being done. Now I'm going to go into a few of these things in detail. Am I running? All right, okay, pardon me for that. Well, as you can see from this, and I won't have to bother, we're very well positioned. We're starting from a very strong base. Canada has already had very, very substantial investments over the last 50 years in information technology. The cable industry in Canada is powerful. Universities across the country and colleges put a tremendous amount of resource in the early years of connectivity to NRCnet, as it used to be called in the initial stage, CANet. We have the highest speed optical backbone network now being constructed in the world, which is very important for institutions such as yours, but it's also important for a whole bunch of other public institutions which are now being brought online to that backbone, and for the corporations that are able to develop the high-speed switches and products that are going to be riding on networks like that globally. We have 4,000, actually closer to 4,500 public access points now rolled out across rural Canada. Community access points. The idea of a community access point is universal public access. We won't get everybody connected in their homes for some period of time, but we can get them connected through local sites that they frequent and that they use and they're comfortable with. And it doesn't take you don't have to have a lot of technology in these sites. You have to have a lot of support. Okay, support is the key. Convenient sites that have got a friendly feel about them, where people know they can get connected. And John and I were at a number of those today in the Oxford County area, and they look heavily used to be, and that's what they're supposed to be. Now they're not as sustained as we'd like to see them, and they're not as maybe elaborate as we'd like to see them, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of them. And we've got places in this country where the campsite is becoming the hardware store, the Cracker Barrel. People basically go to the campsite and hang out, okay? Even though they're connected at home. Why? Because they like to work with their colleagues, their neighbors in surfing the net and finding out what's there, because everybody knows the net's too big for anybody to cope with. So you can, what did you find, what did I find, and maybe we can both make some better use of this. And of course, we've got all the schools and libraries connected now. I think we've connected a few with Baylor Twine, which doesn't carry a lot of bandwidth. But the point of the matter is, it got done, okay? And we're now moving to the next step, which is multimedia connectivity to the classroom by about 2004. And that would would keep us amongst the leaders in the area of information technology. But again, it's not the bandwidth that counts, it's the pedagogy, and I'll get to that in a second. Where does Canada stand in the world? Well, by all these kinds of measures, this one was done by the Conference Board, and there's one other one around that I keep being told I should carry, and it has us rated number 1, but I think that probably a fair assessment is 2, with number 3, 4, and 5 coming up fast, okay? Sweden and Finland are very, very significant players. Again, they haven't got necessarily all their schools connected, but they're smart users. They know how to make this happen. They're the competitors. The U.S. is up there because they spend a lot of money. And you'd be surprised how many problems just go away if you throw enough money at them. Okay? But the question is going to be whether you've got the ability to harness the technology at the broad societal level. I think that's where we're ahead of the U.S. right now. We don't have the depth of the network, but we're getting there fast. And a good way to get a network built is have a lot of people using it and wanting more. Now, we've got a number of programs. I've mentioned some of them. I won't go through them all. CANet3 I mentioned is an extremely important national investment, and it's got to be exploited a lot more than it is now. It's an enormous highway, 25 lanes wide, with a few cars going down every day. Okay? And we've got to fill that thing up, and that means bringing a lot more good, valuable content, which will generate the kinds of things that we talk about: skills, innovation, productivity-enhancing services, and pump it through the public and the private networks across Canada. The Smart Communities program is going on now. Waterloo is one of the communities that's in the final run for that program. It'll be decided about March. We hope that there'll be a lot of communities that don't win that will still go on to fulfill the plans for a smart community activity that they put in place through the discussions around putting an application in place. When I talked to John this morning about the COIN project, that's what he senses will happen there. We want to pair those communities, whether they are actually in the final round or not, with international communities. Okay, if we want to brand Canada, if we want to know what other countries are doing, start twinning. Okay, twin around the idea of smart use of information technology. There's plenty of communities globally that are looking for Canadian partners because of, again, we know how to do it, or have shown how to do it with less money than everybody else. That they're in that they can see in the lead anyway. Community Access Program, we want to launch basically another 5,000 urban sites. We're within days of announcing this competition. It will be heavily oriented towards, it'll be in the 85 urban communities across the country and targeted at places where people who are left out of the information highway nexus right now are situated. So libraries are going to be universally linked through that system. A lot of schools, community centers, housing projects, etc., seniors' homes. The idea is to get as much possible participation by the Canadian public on that information highway as quickly as possible. I've mentioned SchoolNet, the Computers for Schools program, to recycling computers to the school system increasingly from business. Seems maybe possibly like a marginal activity, but believe me, we've delivered close to 30% of the computers that have been delivered in the Canadian school system in the last year have come from this recycling of computers from industry and government. That's very substantial, and it allows a lot of school boards to take the good equipment, the higher end equipment, and put it where it's needed most, and use other equipment in a more thin client dimension. Bringing the voluntary organizations into online. These organizations are heavily relied on by Canadians. There's 200,000 voluntary and charitable organizations across Canada. And they have a massive storage of intellectual property and knowledge around particular issue areas. That's what motivated those people to get engaged in the volunteer activity in the first place. So we can have them pour their services and their information online. The available support systems for Canadians will go up dramatically, and at a fraction of the price that would otherwise be needed just to do it in a traditional way. Digital collections, we're moving ahead to, we've actually produced 300 or 400 digital collections now across Canada, where we've used college and university students, high school students, given them entry-level jobs, converting Canadian cultural collections into electronic form. Very interesting. Nobody thought in the cultural institutions in the country that would be a successful model. Turns out that it's that everybody's digitized stuff to way past what the expectations would be. Got a lot of kids that are running companies now. Started it with multimedia. Started it with a little startup contract, and now run multimedia companies. And as the government moves ahead with the whole cultural part of the information highway, this is going to be a major program area. And finally, we're in the process of launching something called Access CA, which some of you know something about. What it really is coming down to, and it's not fully thought of yet, is a personal portal for all Canadians, so that every Canadian would have a personal on-ramp, highly secure, private, completely under their control, to help them link to local sources of information, so that they don't have to go racing off to some great big portal somewhere, probably south of the border, and find everything posted there. They can start from their community and work out on the information highway. A very convenient way for Canadians to begin to access the web, particularly for those who haven't had the experience. I've talked about the community access program. I'll just touch on a couple of things. This program is very much a partnership endeavor. It works with community organizations across the country. There's a large number of government departments involved or supported, particularly HRDC, Agriculture Canada. We have joint management agreements with provincial governments, and most provinces now, we actually run the program jointly with provincial governments, which is the best way to do this. And it's becoming the front end to the delivery system. Public access points are key to the whole issue of how to reach all Canadians with services. You can't convert a government operation into electronic delivery unless you can guarantee that the last guy somewhere off in some remote community who also pays his taxes can get the service. Otherwise, you're forced to operate two services at and that is enormously expensive. So we've got to figure a way to allow one system to be gradually tapered off while the other system takes over the main load. Okay, and that comes down to the endpoints on your distribution system. So that's another important aspect of CAP. I won't go through all this. You can see the kinds of figures of the kinds of people that come into CAP sites, etc. We're getting a lot of adults in, which is what we're looking for, and youth and people that would have lower incomes, etc. That's what New Brunswick looks like with CAP sites. There's 200 or more CAP sites around New Brunswick now. There's more frequency of CAP sites than there are provincial government service distribution points. And of course, these are provincial government service distribution points and run them with the New Brunswick government. And it's helping the New Brunswick government rationalize its whole service delivery, as it's going to help the federal government do the same thing. I should tell you that if you saw the map for Toronto, there are 700 access points that will be established in Toronto. And you need that kind of scale. If you're going to convert the public with the kinds of access to skills, access to learning, access to e-com, you need to build a system that can take large amounts of users coming in at odd hours a day in places convenient to them to make that happen. Otherwise, the system is going to collapse. We're moving, as I mentioned, in SchoolNet to the idea of a broadband network reaching all schools. Why is this important? Because for about 3 or 4 reasons. Number one, we have got to figure a way to create a national market for Canadian learningware. Otherwise, we're all going to be importing Disney. That's the way kids are going to learn in the next little while. And if we all want that to happen, just keep going the way we are. Because we've wired up the schools, they're going to be using something, okay? And they'll use the most convenient, lowest cost, highest production value thing they can find. But that ain't Canadian in a lot of ways, okay? So we've got good quality stuff that can't find a market, and slightly lower pedagogical quality stuff anyway, that is invading the school system. And that's a problem that is faced by schools all over Canada, all over the United States, all over the world, okay? So if educators want to play a role in the production of good quality educational content, they're going to have to figure a way to have a hand in how that's being done, okay? And we need to figure out mechanisms doing that. Number one is to create a large market in the short term, which will pull suppliers of various different kinds of products, higher quality pedagogical products at least, into the system. Here's the second way. I'm going to give you 2 slides which weren't really part of the initial presentation. I want to have to go back on this one. There we go. I call this the knowledge worker balance sheet. I had my way, and I'm not an economist. I see this as the major way to measure an economy in the knowledge-based area. If I was the leader of a country, okay, I'd know the one measure that I'm being elected on, the quality of life. Okay, what are we electing those guys for anyway, right? My quality of life had better improve, otherwise you're not doing your job. Okay, and every leader intuitively knows that that's what he's there for. So they know where they want Canada to rank in the world, roughly. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. We happen to be first, but so what? That might be happenstance. What's the goal? Is to keep us in the top 5? Well, I'd be happy in the top 5. Maybe some other people would want to be in the top 3. Not too many people would want to be just towards the bottom of the top 10. So if we know what the goal, the overall goal is going to be, then we need to know how our competitiveness ranks with our main competitors who want to knock us out of that category so they can get in. Okay? And we need to know the kind of investment they're making in the knowledge portion of their economy, because that's what we're competing with. We don't have to spend the same amount of money, but we've got to get the same or more impact, value for money out of the expenditure. We also need to know the growth in the knowledge-based portion of the economy, because that's the highest value-added contributor to overall standards of living and economic growth. And it's the biggest user of skills. Once we know that and the expected output per knowledge worker over a period of time, we'll know the number of knowledge workers we need in the economy. And then it's just a matter of calculation, because we know how many are exiting the school system at whatever level and going into the labor force, directly or indirectly through post-secondary education. And the end result is we know what we need, okay? And then we can build a plan to produce it. Unfortunately, I don't think we've got the numbers for that. I've been searching around. And it's tough because nobody even has a definition of what knowledge work is. So I'm going to start with, okay? So I'm flabbergasted, not an economist. So And economists don't get their minds around these things as easily as I thought they would. So, but it seems to me that those are the questions to ask in trying to build a knowledge-based economy. This chart is to try and show something that I think is very important to policymakers as they try to look at the education system and try and figure out what role that has with the knowledge-based economy. The focus is largely on the post-secondary system, and rightly so. We're producing we need high-quality personnel, HQP. We need them in large numbers. Those are the people that design and engineer the production process and design and engineer the new products. But they don't make the products. The products are made in plants by people slightly down the skills ladder from the engineers. And we couldn't afford plants full of engineers. So no sense in just concentrating on that portion of the population. What we need to do, though, is we need to take a look at the entire education system and figure out how to motivate it towards higher levels of knowledge gain in a shorter period of time. It's not the issue of not the brain drain. Brain drain is bleeding off a tiny fraction of what the Canadian economy is producing. It has to be bleeding off high-profile people, but not that many of them. Okay. What we need to figure out is brain gain. Okay. How do you generate a huge increase, a tripling or a quadrupling of the number of knowledge workers in a short period of time? That goes back to the first slide. It's the country that masters that's going to win, because we are not competing on the basis of investment. We are competing for investment on the basis of knowledge. So what we're suggesting is you've got to focus on the whole education system, and at the bottom, you can have a dramatic impact. Here's the key of everything I do. If you want to know the thing that will have the biggest single impact on all the stuff that I'm talking about, it's this. How do you generate 5 million kids to want to learn faster using information technology? We have wired up the country school system, and we're about to wire it even higher. What does that all mean? It means just a vast expenditure. It doesn't mean an iota of an increase in skills. But if we look at how we can exploit that technology, we have laid the basis and infrastructure for what I would call innovation. Okay, an infrastructure for innovation in the school system. Now, how do we motivate the teachers and the students to use that more effectively than all the other countries that are putting in the very same infrastructure are doing? Okay, and there's a very simple solution to this, and it comes from a number of years' experience in trying to do things in the education system and failing. So I'm going to toss here and have a good water. There are 5 million people, 5 million kids in the school system in Canada, 25 of them per class, so we have approximately 200,000 to 250,000 classrooms. We have, what we are doing is running something called the Grassroots Project. And it's a very simple idea. When we linked the first few schools together, we sat back and watched what they did. Okay? Well, they did the only thing they could possibly do with information technology, after they'd surfed around a bit and downloaded a few things from NASA, they decided to do a project here. Okay? You know, somebody thought up something here and was sent it to the only other place that would listen to what they did, another class very much the same as they were, only at some distance. And they did a project together. Okay? So after a while, we saw that these schools were basically doing quite sophisticated collaborative projects using the internet at all different levels. They don't have to have multimedia. They were doing it with email. Okay? So how do you, and kids were actually excited about this stuff. I went and visited a lot of classrooms, and teachers were motivated. Kids were interested. Teachers who didn't think this information highway stuff would work at all were finding that, boy, you know, sit a kid down in front of a computer and you don't have a problem on task time. You can't get them, you can't get them away from the thing. Okay, and the more interesting educational stuff you put there, the harder it is to extract them. Okay, well that's a different paradigm than what's taking place in most schools in the country. So how do you engineer that so that every classroom, because we don't know where the next genius is going to come from, so we've got to expose every learner to these opportunities. So the way to do that is roughly this kind of math. You take 200,000 classes, you divide them down by 10 classrooms a project, which is what we get on average from this. So we need 20,000 projects to expose every learner at least once a year to the idea of a collaborative online learning project. And then you simply buy them. Okay? And that's exactly what we do. We buy, the federal government contracts with classrooms to produce learning projects. Okay? Very simple measures. Excellent, online, collaborative, and innovative. The curriculum rate is in there somewhere. Right? 4 things. I won't go back over them. But believe me, very simple. And the idea is not to set the bar high enough that any school in any classroom can't compete. But every classroom can do a curriculum-related, online, excellent, and innovative project. Because they've got good teachers and smart kids. So the makings of an innovative project are right there before them. Okay? So how do you engineer that across the country? Now, from that idea came this program called Grassroots. And interestingly enough, even though this is not an area of federal responsibility, we have every provincial Ministry of Education now on side, lots of school boards, teachers that are excited about this stuff, companies that are giving us money. I wouldn't say that they can't go fist yet, but it's getting to that point. And we're simply contracting with classrooms, okay? Producing all sorts of Canadian content, which is good pedagogical content, highly customized. None of these projects are the same. So, supporting the curriculum from all across the country. Okay? So how are you going to grow skills and content at the same time? Yeah, grow it from the bottom up. Okay? And the end result of all these conundrums that we're facing, there's a very important thing there. One problem, one solution solves about 4 or 5 problems in the area of information technology. And if we do this kind of thing, what we found, I know I'm going on at length about this, but it's very important, okay, is kids learn their academic skills faster. They learn information technology not as an end in itself, but as a tool to be used in a process of some sort. Okay, it's across the curriculum type approach. They are learning employability skills, teamwork, problem solving, communications, collaboration, which the business community tries to get the education system to figure out how to do, and education systems have problems. They understand the logic, but they haven't quite got the design yet. And finally, they're learning entrepreneurial activity. And we've tracked a number of these kids that have migrated from classroom to classroom. By the time they're in grade 10, they got businesses. The school is an incubator, okay? Kids are running businesses because a project and a product line are not all that different, okay? They're basically running micro businesses in a learning environment where failure is not a trauma, okay? It's part of the learning process. So I'm going to talk a little later to David and Tom and others about extending this at the university level. And in fact, we've got an example of that in a second. The whole learning area is another area we're involved in. We're trying to promote a national integrated marketplace for Canadian-based learningware. I won't go into all the details. One program which is very important is Campus Connection. And as of next week, I believe we're going live with Campus Connection, which has pulled all the courseware that exists across Canadian institutions, packages it in a reasonable way for public servants, and then we're just pumping it on the desktops for the nation's civil service. And as they come on with their training needs, they can begin to acquire that courseware from you in institutions. We're giving you an extra market for learning online, for producing online stuff. At the end of the day, it may be that online learning isn't as good as in-residence learning. That's actually not a matter of debate, that's a matter of where you happen to be. If you're an online learner and you don't think it's as good, well, it isn't as good. But if you happen to be a hard-pressed individual that doesn't have the luxury of being able to go to a campus and you need a skill set quickly, online learning might be just what you're looking for. So there's a way of capturing this marketplace, and we better move fast to do it in various, we need to be flexible in how we go about doing it. One way is to get more market share quickly, and that's what we're trying to deliver through that program. Now, I should also tell you, and this is a good example of the information highway and how dastardly it can be. This is maybe the Mr. Hyde part of this exercise. We've gone out as well, and to all the institutions, including Waterloo, and we've asked you, speaking as the federal government, for a range of administrative services that would support the other part of the program, which is the coursework part. Okay, so we're looking for prior learning assessment, credit banking, degree certificate recognition, registrar services, and student services. In other words, we're creating our own virtual university for the federal government. Okay, we're piecing it together. We don't need to ask anybody. We're not trying to operate a university. We're just dissembling it. And we're then sewing up the pieces in a different way than would normally be done. Instead of it being an institution, we'll take a piece from here, and a piece from there, and a piece from over here, and a whole bunch of coursework from everywhere, and pump it out on everybody's desktops, and let them buy whomever services they want. Now, you don't know. You probably wish we had thought of that, maybe not, maybe. But you won't know that somebody else isn't going to come in with a yes. Yeah, we think that's a really good idea. Okay, and we know there are going to be people that are coming in that way, right? So what's stopping any large employer doing exactly the same thing? If we can do it, and this is, one half a person here in my shop, okay? If that's all it takes, what's to stop somebody else big doing it? Somebody else can afford half a person here, okay? Why can't they do it as well? And what does that mean for your institution? If jerks like me can go around and actually produce an online university for 100,000 people. God, that's bad. Okay? We're going to be doing some additional work, hopefully, with David on the whole idea of how do we motivate universities and colleges to think online, not necessarily to do online, but to at least put it into their strategic plan. If you're going to be slam dunked by somebody, you might as well know about it early, okay? And you can have it as an escape strategy, okay? But that's what we need to do. People need to think about this, and it's quite surprising how many people at the post-secondary level don't think this is a really important game. Note makers. We had a project, and I think there were a number from the, Tom, you were involved in note makers. What we were trying to do there is show that actually we can produce some good quality courseware at much less than the cost that you might otherwise think by simply hiring students, putting them together with faculty, developing a collaborative approach across institutions, and doing things in a modular form. What would it cost if we did it that way compared to what people were saying the cost of online courseware would be, which was well over the $100,000 mark. And we found that, in fact, it could be done for $25,000 a course, approximately. But maybe it's $25,000 a course module, but in any case, it's substantially lower than what it would otherwise be. And finally, the pace setters thing. Why am I getting that thing on there? My battery is fully charged. Pace setters, and Tom and I are going to talk about this a little bit this afternoon. A different model entirely. One of the big problems that we face in Canada, as I mentioned before, is how do we transmit and innovate and commercialize new innovation? Why not take the idea of grassroots, that thing that we worked on the K-12 system, and put it at the university level? Why don't we bankroll university students and see if they can develop a unique commercial application for the information highway, which actually is, of course, a global marketplace at their fingertips with a really cheap set of tools, and see if they can develop a product in the course of their 1 year in undergraduate studies and build a business. Okay? And we did this at Carleton University, and out of the two projects we funded, we actually got 2 successes, 2 out of 2. I'm not willing to regard that as a tremendous success, but it's worth pursuing a little farther. Can we create a learning experience at the undergraduate level where students, challenged by an opportunity to build a business, can then move that business forward? What we found in those experiences, by the way, is the kids thought, and I'm quoting, and I'm not just quoting from one, I'm quoting from about 4. The most valuable experience we've had as undergraduates was that project. We learned more in that project. In doing that, what we learned is 70% enough. In the business community, a business plan that's 70% accurate, you're dead. Okay? It's 90%, it's 100%. You want to survive, you better have a 100% business plan. Okay? So we have to master that stuff. We could actually get away with some of the coursework, work at a lot less than that. This was a challenge. And we had kids dropping everything else to keep doing this and their studies at the same time. There's 2 businesses, one of which is probably going to crash this, that did a 400 business. I think that's basically it. At least my computer won't change another slide on me, so that's it. End of presentation. I would be happy to take any questions. I think the key thing that I learned is, just step back a little bit from this, is when we got into this, David Johnson was a key guy in basically putting together the strategic framework for the government to want to get engaged in the use of information technology this way, and understanding the issues and really recognizing that the downsides weren't that substantial for doing something, and the upsides were potentially quite important and politically popular. One other thing we did was we had the SchoolNet program in place, and it was very interesting to see what happened in government with SchoolNet. First of all, it was a skunk works project. Nobody really knew what we were up to. Most particularly the provincial governments. They didn't know enough about information and technology to know that this could actually work. By the time they found out, it was too late. Okay, so why not collaborate, because it ain't going to go away anyway. Okay, what we learned from that project is the following. We set a big goal, huge goal. If I'd known how big that goal was, I never would have been hard to do it. Okay, it just didn't have much prospect of success. But it got done on time and at a fraction of the cost. And it got done actually a little earlier than otherwise would have been the case. Now, when you're into a big infrastructure project, and linking all the country's schools turns out to be actually a big infrastructure project, it's very difficult to do something in 4 years' time. You don't build the national highway system in 4 years. You're lucky if you can even draw it up on a piece of paper in that time. Okay? But this is a project that was dreamed up in a hotel room, and the delivery point was less than 4 years in the future. Okay? Now, very rudimentary, but enough to build national consensus. And that was the second thing the government learned. Okay? It could think big and actually could deliver big on the information highway and wouldn't break the bank. Okay? And the risks weren't as bad as they thought. The second thing was, people actually like a big vision. Okay? The country's sort of waiting for a big vision. If you think big, you might fail, but they won't damn you too much for thinking it in the first place, especially if it's in a non-crucial area. And the provinces can come in and collaborate. This isn't a country that's pulled apart at every turn by federal, provincial things. There are actually things we work on together and actually get done. Otherwise, I guess, why would the country be here? Okay? So that's the second big thing. The third big thing is, boy, you never get branded with a success. Okay? That little investment has really paid off. Okay? We're known all over the world as being one of the leaders in information technology in the education system. And considering that 4 years ago, and this wouldn't be exactly accurate, because there was a lot of work going into information technology before that, but now we've got the brand. Okay? People think we are the leaders. We're not as far ahead as we think we are, but that doesn't matter. The customer at the other end thinks we're ahead, and that's what counts. So let's get in there and perfect our stuff along the way and sell them as much of our good old technology as they can possibly absorb. And there are countries out there which are looking to deal with Canada. They want to deal with Canada because we're a better partner than a lot of other people they could do business with. Okay? We know how to do it more cheaply, but more honestly. Okay? We're more upfront about the weaknesses in what we're selling than the strengths. And that is important because at the end of the day, none of this stuff is without its blemishes. Okay? So they'd rather know upfront. I'll stop there and be happy to take any questions on this or any other things that I can confidently deal with. Or maybe we should wait for David to come back.
Any questions? Everybody to shot.
Tom?
You've talked about a lot of different sectors, but the federal government operations are sort of interspersed between the things that you talked about. What do you see the role of these technology government operations in the federal government? They're going to have an impact on universities, but
what is it?
The same thing applies to the federal.
Oh, there's no question. And it can have numerous types of impacts. Nobody's going to make the tax department go away because we've sort of got a monopoly there. But you can dramatically increase your revenues by use of information technology of one sort or another, and they've shown that over the last year just through call centers. Instead of sending people tax bills, and the next thing that comes to them is a visit from somebody that's going to kneecap them. Okay, they just talk people into taking them through why it's important to pay your taxes. And guess what? They got $1 billion more revenue just by a call center support system on people wanting to pay their taxes. That's pretty good. Cost them a few thousand to put in, they got billions out of it. So the productivity that can be implemented in the federal government by the intelligent use and innovative use of information technology is very profound. Okay, and that's recognized now. People are coping with it and trying to get it from under Y2K, and the government tends to run big systems, so they're very complicated. But that kind of stuff is coming, and it's been recognized now that we have to basically move forward quickly in this field. The second thing is the following. The federal government is in a very different position than the provincial governments. Provincial governments deal with people. Okay. They've got a lot more things that are transactional with the public than the federal government does. And the local government has even more things with the public. So the more distant you get away, the more senior your government level is, the less you're working with the public, and the more you're working with other levels of government. You can fade away on that basis. Okay? Governments have got to forge a new partnership with the citizenry at all levels. And what the information highway brings to the federal government is an ability to engage the citizen. Not in the transmission of a service for which it's a transaction, but on the distribution of information. And the federal government has got very, very substantial holdings of information. We've got the ability to go out and gather large amounts of data on various things for a long period of time and digest that. It tends to be locked up in the hands of a bunch of analysts who produce a paper which gets filed on a shelf or sent to a library, and once in a while people come and get it. But putting it in the hands of people on a daily basis at their fingertips, that's powerful. Okay? So that's the second thing the government can do, a big leap to the individual with powerful information. And the third thing is the ability to collaborate. Okay? Because nation building isn't one level of government. It's a collaborative government. And so the information highway allows kinds of collaboration that are literally not possible by hierarchical bureaucracies, as much as they can. And the worst kind of collaboration is, I'll give you money and you do the following, and then you get it done and you come back to me. It creates a dependency. Whereas information technology binds people together on goal development, and that is really key. And that we're finding more and more and more of is the collaboration that the information has. And of all the things, that's the most important. Okay, the productivity will get there one way or another. Government will farm out more of its operations, etc. But the collaborative part is really the most important part.
Just to follow that with one other thing, combine the two halves of your answer. Revenue generation is very important. Information dissemination is very important. There are at least two models in the world. One says that the US model, information should be provided to the citizens free of charge except for transaction costs. There's a European model developing which is cost recovery plus. We seem to be in the cost recovery plus mode right now. How do you see this evolving down the road?
I don't think that has as much to do with information technology as it has to do with government downsizing. I once wrote a book on the whole idea of what we call revenue dependency, turning government operations into profit centers, which I never read the book. But the key thing is that it had to be controlled in some ways, because you really are developing a national asset with certain kinds of information. If you go around charging people more than they can pay, you're impeding the use of the knowledge that you want them to use to promote productivity. So we're being very narrow-minded in the way we're coming up with the charging system for certain kinds of information. And I think there's no mechanism at the present time to bring that view of the price-setting structure into the price-setting mechanism. And that really is what needs to be done. Information technology could spread stuff with a cost or without a cost, doesn't make any difference. It's a powerful disseminator of information technology, but at the price to get online for a service is still too high. It's not going to be used. So we got to look at the balance point. There's some revenue is probably good on all services, but a lot of revenue is probably not good on any service. So where's the point on a service by service basis? But I think the answer is yes.
You mentioned about the community access program and how that brought the library schools together and that accessibility. So that's what created it to happen and the success of it. Now you run smart communities. So what is your definition of a smart community, the success of that?
The success of the smart community?
Yeah, what is your success of a smart community? You know,
yeah, it isn't necessarily being a winner of a smart communities program, that's for sure. I mean, there's by no definition, I think the federal government will go with is only 12 smart communities in the country. Okay, there are 12 communities that will win a competition, and something will happen to them, which may or may not be positive, but anyway, I hope it is. I think the key thing is there are a lot of other communities striving to do the very same thing, get smarter, okay? And how they're using information technology is very diverse. There's many different kinds of innovations taking place in that melee of communities. Not all of it's transportable to other places. You can't do something in Toronto and expect it to work necessarily in Ecosecum. It might, but it may not. You can do some stuff in Ecosecum and that can actually play in a lot of other communities across the country. What our, I guess, responsibility is to try and identify the innovations that are taking place and transport them to places where they could be used. Okay? And we're not trying to do that individually. I don't think we've got the expertise. We're relying on the communities to get together themselves and exchange their best practices, using the information I already spared best practices with bulletin boards, launch studies, what worked there, why would it work, what were the conditions of success, those kinds of things. But I don't have a definition of what a smart community would be in terms of a town. What I'd say is look to the use, not the technology. Okay? How to basically capitalize on something that is getting cheaper in price and is becoming more and more pervasive. What gain can you get from that in terms of your community's objectives, social, economic, and cultural? Yes?
I think with your presentation, there's a high emphasis on these centers of excellence, such as the smart communities, and eventually over time, their knowledge and expertise will spread throughout the country. But in the interim, you have these islands of technology. You mentioned that you try to partner with industry. Now, I run my own small business at a university in computer engineering, and we done some work in this content generation. We've talked to many people, our local member of parliament and other people. They've all said it's a good idea. How do we set up one of these partnerships? It seems that everyone's telling us it's a good idea, and maybe it was something local, then we could partner with the smart community. But how do we do this on a national level?
Good question. I don't know. Very few things can just go national. Okay, it just doesn't happen much like that. It goes from place to place. Okay, the success travels very quickly. Okay, not because it's a success per se, it's because people are looking for something. Okay, what you've really got across in large parts of the country is desperate people. Okay. The industrial age has sort of hollowed out large parts of the countryside. It's extracted just about as much as it can possibly extract, right? So you've got people in communities whose housing values are going down, kids are leaving town, plants are closing down, etc. They're looking for hope. They're looking for a way in which this new, fast-emerging information highway and digital age is going to do something for them, which largely means saving, okay? So you've got a group of communities that are looking for a success, looking for an innovation, something that they can take from where it was and put where they are and make a change, okay, a positive change, right? So if you've got a technology like that, you're going to find a lot of communities that are going to be very interested in finding out more about it, okay? And that's why we started CAP in rural Canada. We didn't start CAP in urban Canada, we started in rural Canada. Because those were the people that were most interested in basically using information technology because nothing else held much of a prospect of it. Okay. And now we're a little bit worried that we're going to do some damage, but that's a sword that cuts both ways. But, and some of the stuff that I think you were talking about, how to help them using geographic information systems, locate stuff. The biggest fear that I've got on the whole information highway is this. We've gone out and we've done what we had to do, which is wired everybody up, or wired large parts of the countryside up, only to have mega portals from the U.S. come in with their marketing muscle and suck those towns dry, okay? To extract all the anybody with change in their pocket gets online and has the stuff trucked in. And all you got to do is, you guys are sitting on 401. Didn't we talk about this on the way up here today? You know, I live in London, used to live in London, so I travel back and forth a lot. And the traffic increase on the 401 is probably faster than the information highway, okay? That's the old highway and it's going fast, okay? And I'll bet you a lot of that stuff is being trucked in because somewhere or other people are buying that stuff and saying, well, just send it by a truck, whatever it has to be, right? Well, that is bad news. We're only at the top where only a few percent of the Canadian public is actually buying anything significant online. But give it 5 years to see what happens. Okay? How many towns around here can withstand 5 or 6 or 7% drop in purchasing of high-end products? You just take a look at a small town on Main Street, the camera store. Okay, probably a marginal enterprise to begin with, right? He only sells to high-end movie cameras, or what do you call it, digital cameras in a month, right? What happens if they start coming in by truck? There goes the profit margin. So the kid who used to work in the camera store can't be afforded anymore, okay? And because he can't get a job in town, he leaves, okay? So there, now that multiplied by 100 changes the face of the town, okay? So how are we going to prevent that from happening? That is the key. That's one of the keys on the economic side. The other is getting your purchasing information, getting exported to some other guy down somewhere else with his mega portal, and they know everything about us, okay? Not because we gave them information, but they simply track the patterns, okay? Tracking patterns of use, right? And pretty soon, the intelligence on the Canadian consumer population and communities, etc., is gone. It's in somebody else's hands, and they know what to do with it. They're not paying those billions of dollars for those highly inflated .com stocks for nothing. Okay? There's this isn't happenstance. This isn't sort of mindless entrepreneurism. That's good old, that's people who know what they're doing, okay? And they know that this is going to pay off. So that's the bet. So how do we find a way around that problem? That's the $64 billion question. Yes.
You spoke about a number of school projects involving technology. I'm sure there'll be no lack of technical skills for the students. But what about the teachers? Is there a plan to bring the teachers' technical skills up to a level where they can manage these projects?
Yes, I think you put your finger on probably the most significant problem facing public education and information technology. It really is the ability to train teachers on how to use the information technology. A large number are completely untrained. And in other jurisdictions internationally, they put a lot of money into training. In fact, we put money mainly into technology, and we're thinking about training teachers. The Brits, for example, are putting huge amounts of money into training teachers, and they'll use technology when they do it, okay? And that's a smarter system. You've got to figure out how to train people, give them a little bit of technology, train a little bit more, give them a little bit of technology. That's the appropriate way to spend this stuff. Now, having already spent a large amount on technology, we need a national training plan for teachers. And we've been working with our colleagues in the provincial governments to try and figure out ways in which this could be done in innovative but also systemic ways. So there are things that are being tried there, and there's more work being put in place to try and come up with those structures, those mechanisms. One thing I would say though, it's you can make a mistake significantly on something as big as a major training plan. You've got to give people a way. Teachers don't need to know how to use technology. Kids know how to use technology. Teachers know how to translate technology into a learning opportunity. Okay, it's the pedagogy of technology that's the key, not the technology. And I was talking to somebody the other day who was saying, if I thought all the amount of time I spent as a teacher educator, training teachers and using some software package which only 6 months later was out of date and I had to start all over again with a date, that's the wrong approach. Okay, what we want to do is show them how to use technology around a pedagogical endeavor, and the next technology that comes in, the kids will master in 15 minutes anyway. Okay, and then give them the land support they need so the system will crash all the time. And I think those are the key pieces. And that's why that grassroots thing is very important. We've got training models around that. Put kids together with a teacher, they do something on a project, they understand how to make it work, and they acquire technology as they need it. And they acquire little bits bolted onto what they've got. Nobody ever complains about a technology understanding problem, kids or teachers.
You've done an excellent job on funding, so we say, demonstrations, but demonstrations aren't going to win the war. What we need is some way to leverage our ability to generate funding. If nothing else, we're faced with a population 10 times our size, just the south of us, and they'll overwhelm us. Do you have programs
to take things to scale?
Basically, say one demonstration program is nice, it shows possibilities, but we've got to get a lot of people doing a lot of work in the next year.
Yeah, it's very common, and in fact, a lot of this stuff that is sort of coming out of the Scouts Works type operation, it suffers from a lack of ability to do things to scale. It gets done, it just takes time. Like CAP started as a Scout project, and it turned into a fairly major endeavor, and again, even more major. We have to be very careful about what we can focus on to take to scale. Okay? That's what it comes down to, because we can only do a few things of that size. And so the government is actually considering 3 to-scale type projects right now. SchoolNet 3, working with provincial governments to move the classrooms to multimedia, which would be, at least in the way that other countries are doing it, multiple billions of dollars. The Americans have committed $15 billion to doing that very same thing. The Brits, $5 billion. Okay, we're trying to scramble together to figure out ways we can do that for about $500 million. Okay. The second thing is access CA. How do we combat this problem of the vast expected leakage of e-com out of Canada? Okay, and also at the same time figure a way in which to give Canadians control over the internet. Okay, put the control back in the hands of the people, the users, okay, which is where the internet started. Okay, so that's the second issue to scale. And the third is the whole government online, which includes CAP. How do we take that up to the point where we've got a sustainable distribution infrastructure? The other one might be Canary. But those are the major sustainable strategic investments that the government's making.
You mentioned multimedia. The question is, who's multimedia?
Yeah. Well, what we're doing right now on the multimedia fund, if you like, my computer is go backwards or forward, so. But anyway, is we've been working on subsidizing the demands, the supply side, working, helping help firms produce a little bit more. That's not a sustainable model. It's a model that actually government's got out of in almost every other way. What we're trying to do is collapse the fragmented marketplace into a bigger marketplace, protect it a little bit in some innovative ways, and create a large amount of demand for Canadian learning. Okay, and the key to this is canary. The key point is you can transport multimedia learningware from any Canadian educational institution, university, college, kindergarten, on the backbone of Canary at zero cost, super high bandwidth, infinite bandwidth, zero cost. What could you do if you had that? Okay, and you can transport that to any place across the country on that backbone. And when we link the schools to multimedia, we should be able to reach every classroom. Now, can you build a product that could sell in 200,000 classrooms? Okay. With a small amount of money, 200,000 classrooms would be enough to float some Canadian content, which would be competitive in the world. And I think that's the answer. We can stimulate a lot of demand for world-class multimedia product if we take a fragmented market and knit it together faster than anybody else. And then put, because our content is very good content when it gets built. It's got tremendous pedagogical depth to it. And it's got a lot of creative ability for the user to interact creatively. And those are really important things. That's not the way some other people build their